Hey Rockstars, I'm here at NAMM 2025 and I'm very excited because I want to show you something that I've worked really hard on with these guys who are right behind me. So I'm at the Metric Halo booth with Make Believe Studios, as you can see right there. There's Rick Carson doing an interview right there at the couch, and on display is this plugin that I collaborated with Rick and with Make Believe Studios and with Metric Halo, and very specially with Bill Szymczyk, who produced Hotel California. So this is the MBSI plugin that I've been talking about on my show. I've been promoting it for a while. We released it this year, super excited about it. What this is a plugin model of the mixing console that I had in my studio at the Toy Box Studio in Nashville for 15 years. I had an MCI console that was custom built by Jeep Harned for Criteria Studios in Miami, where it lived through the 1970s, winning multiple Grammys and doing all kinds of amazing records like Hotel California for the Eagles, the Bee Gees' Stayin' Alive and Saturday Night Fever. It did the Grease soundtrack, it did Margaritaville, it did We're an American Band, Grand Funk Railroad, Eric Clapton, I Shot the Sheriff, all kinds of great records, right? So I had this console in my studio, and when I actually modernized my studio and I sold it, I teamed up with these guys and we captured the sound of the board and created this great plugin. So this is a version of the MCI console when it was in my studio. And I want to give you guys a little bit of a walkthrough and show you what's what. So right now you can see that you've got, basically it wasn't like a channel strip, it was a split console where you'd have mic pre's on one side of the console and then mixing on the other, and then you'd have the EQ section down the middle, which were cards that we could actually pull out and put into different parts of the console depending on how we wanted to work. But Bill Szymczyk, when he made Hotel California with the Eagles, he particularly was fond of channel 13. So we actually modeled channel 13 in the board, and I recreated the whole vocal chain and basically the signal chain for channel 13 when we made this plugin. So when you open up the MBSI plugin in a session, it shows up, it can show up see this up here, it says C, which is classic mode. And that means it shows up the way that the plugin, or the way that the console would have shown up. So that involves things like, right here you have a trim knob, which is our gain setting for mic pre-gain. And because when I use the board, I would sometimes do things like, gain up like crazy a direct guitar plugged in, or I might actually take two of these mic pre's and daisy chain them together to get an even higher gain on something. We created a special version of that here where you have a line level gain, or you can hit this switch to a mic level gain, or hit it one more time and you get OD for overdrive. So doing this, you can gain up and get like this awesome distortion on electric guitars if you want, or just get a really nice saturation, a little bit of crunch on things, or you can back it up and run it at line mode or mic mode, and it just sounds clean and has just this beautiful, beautiful kind of little bit of saturation on transients. It sounds like drums, guitars, electric guitars sound really, really good through this. A lot of the Joe Walsh guitars were recorded through this as well. So anyway, it starts out with the mic pre section, so you've got this gain, you can select that, and then you come down, and at least in the plugin here, I'll walk through, this would have been at the end of the signal chain on the console, but you just see it next on the plugin. This was actually, believe it or not, a built-in gate on every channel. So back at a time when everything was on tape, and they might have been a little bit concerned about having noise build up in a mix, and you didn't want to have like too many tracks that weren't being used in a moment adding noise to your final mix. You had this option to turn up the gate a little bit and gate the tape hiss that was bleeding through on that track while you were mixing. So we decided with the plug-in version that since we don't necessarily need that as much because we've got cleaner tracks in digital, and it wasn't necessarily a critical part of the sound of the board, we added a feature where when you come up here and click on the C, you switch it into modern mode. Here, I'll do it again where you can see the whole thing. And then these new features pop up. You see that? If you click this in modern mode, now this goes to a compressor. So what we did is we worked with Bill Szymczyk and we said, hey Bill, if you could have a compressor built into this, what would you like to have? And he was like, oh my God, that would be amazing, because it would have been incredible to have his favorite compression ratios and sound profiles in the console if he could have while he was working. So Bill teamed up with Rick, and of course they created 3 different compressor options that you can access right here. So you've got basically a fast release version of the compressor, a medium release, and a slow release, and they're slightly different models. They're not exact emulations of anything, but I think they may have measured some of Bill's favorite compressors in the studio. But then you've got your threshold here for adjusting your compression threshold. You've got your attack time for slow attack or fast attack. You've got your release switch, fast, medium, and slow. And then you have actually this depth knob. And so what that does is it means that once you can cross this threshold, how much compression do you want to do? So think about it like that. Sometimes you see plugins that work that way. And then you have, so you don't have an output gain here, you actually have that in the rest of the stage here. And then you just turn on this compress button, and then that will light up and show you that you've got some compression activated. And it will actually, as I remember, it will actually light up a little bit when you're compressing, since there isn't a meter to show you that. So that's a really cool feature of switching it to modern. Now I'll go back to the classic mode, and we'll go next to the EQ and talk about what's there. So you see on the EQ, we have, these were always detented on the console. So this is a high frequency EQ that starts out at 10 kilohertz, and you can switch it to 8 kilohertz. And that actually happens down here at this switch. Let's see, as I recall, when this switch was up, these were great. These were these physical plastic switches where you do it and there was a light. It's almost like Christmas lights on this board when it was running. I'll click one in so you can see it. So if you click that in, you'd push that in, and then that would switch it down to the 8 kilohertz mode. And if you switched it out, that takes it up to 10K. And then this would give you the ability to switch. You know, these were stepped resistors inside these guys. So it was very, very precise, and it was a good, clean signal path. And then you could get minus 10 dB or plus 10 dB of gain, and you could, again, choose 10 or 8 kilohertz. Now you come down to the mid section, and this was really unique on the board. It was very interesting because it was so early when this was designed, which was 1969 when G. Parnid was commissioned to actually build this thing for Criteria. It was a stepped boost only mid-range. So it would boost all the way up to plus 14 dB. You could get tons of boost. And I think it would also do that like narrowing Q feature. As you boosted more, you'd get like a real sonic quality to the frequencies. And then here you have all these different frequencies. You could flip through it, start at 75 and go up to 15K. But when we actually shot it out, we measured that there were some other like center points for these. So that is highlighted here, so you can actually see some of these other frequency center points. And it did some interesting and unusual things, like it jumps back when it switches to that one, and then jumps back up again. So there's like these unusual quirks in the board that gave it a really cool sound, and we really stayed true to the analog console when we were modeling this, and we said if that's what the board was doing, we wanted to know about it because we were trying to create that sound and make sure we held on to it, you know? And then you come down to the lows. Oh, let me see here. And then over here also we had this. So again, you could switch to your high Q for the mid-range, or switch it out and you'd have your wider Q for the mid-range up here for those boosts. Then you come down to the low frequencies, and this would default to 100 kilohertz. And again, if you switched it, you could get 60 hertz, excuse me. 100 hertz or 60 hertz. So 100 was killer on, like, you know, actually when I talked to Bill Szymczyk about that, he said he would have used 100 for the kick drum and 60 for the bass, which was really cool to hear, you know, talking about that whole concept of like, which frequency do we want to use? Where does the bass sit? Where does the kick sit, you know? And again, you can use your own taste and your own ears for that and make up your own decisions, but that's what Bill Szymczyk was choosing for his. It was cool, you know? So here you can boost it 10 dB for the lows and cut it 10 dB for the lows, and it's all detented as well. Then you come down here and you had those buttons for switching between your frequencies and your Q. There's your in and out for the whole EQ. And then if you come down here, you actually have another switch, and that would give you a 40 hertz roll off, which again has a little bit of a bump there. So that was part of that low frequency boost if you wanted to like maybe cut on a bass guitar or cut on the kick drum even, or cut on a vocal, and it kind of warmed up and boosted up the lows and the vocals and made them sound really cool. And then you could turn it off, and then you had this other option where you could switch and roll off the 10K and above, which sometimes is exactly what you want to do on things like cymbals and room mics and stuff that's like super bright, and you want to just like get a nice gentle roll off and trim off that top on a sound. Or even on vocals, you know? Sometimes that's the secret sauce. And then you come over here and there were these beautiful faders, and here, back out for a second because I want to show you. With the faders, they were called like airplane faders. So they sort of had this up and over quality. They were like actually curved on the fader, which you can kind of see a little bit here. You can kind of tell that they were trying to do a little bit of a curve here. And then look at how they were really cool shapes on the knobs, or the fader knob, or whatever you want. I guess it's not a knob, it's a fader grabber. Top, fader cap. And you can see how it changes shape as it's going up and over this, and even the light reflects off it really nicely. So that was a lot of fun. That was a cool feature. And then when you come all the way down and you turn the fader off, it would hit this switch and activate it right there. And this would light up to let you know that this channel was muted, which was so cool. Plus, you don't really see it on here, but plus on the console, when you do that and pull this up, it kind of, a little bit of backlight would sort of like light up this a little bit, this plastic cover with all the numbering on it. And then we had a scribble strip down here, and you could put your own message in there and stuff. And let me go to the modern again. I'll switch that. And now you notice that we've added some extra features. So again, I talked about how the compressor appears, but over in the EQ section, we now have a cut button, so the mid-range will actually cut instead of boosting. So that would be boost by default, and you can switch it to cutting those mids. And you'll notice that now the pots are sweepable. Now let's say you wanted to keep that detented pot action going, you just hit the shift button. Don't hit the shit button, hit the shift button, and then now it's detented. So you can still have it operate like that even if it's in a modern mode and you're doing the cut here. So that's a feature with the mids. Now with the lows, I think they stayed the same, except that down here where you had this 40 hertz and 10 kilohertz, we now have a both switch. So you can do that, and you can actually filter lows and highs simultaneously. So all these great little added features that would have been harder to do in the analog console are now available in the plugin too. You also get a phase, a polarity switch right here. Not phase, polarity, technically. So this will flip the polarity of your signal, so you can quickly like check polarity on drums and things. That did not exist in the console. I actually had to manually patch through the patch bay, or you would have had to just have a whole studio that was wired perfectly so there was never a phase issue or something like that if you wanted to have it in phase. But with the console, since we're in multi-track studios and you want to make sure that your drums are all working right and everything's like in phase, now you can like quickly check phase on all your drum sounds while you're dialing up a mix, which is super cool. And then let's see, what else do we have? I think everything else stayed the same with the fader here. Let me check that. Yeah, no changes there on the fader. But one of the cool things we have is you can go deeper into some of these settings. If I click on this gear, look at this pop up. We have a dual mono button here. Now what that means is this is a stereo instance of this on this track. I guess this is a kick track on this example, but you can see it was a stereo track. So when you click dual mono, it actually brought back one of those things that I loved in the analog console. Like let's say you had 2 room mics on your drums. I noticed that the analog board initially, it originally had like this great widening effect to the stereo imagery of the drums, which I really loved. And when we first did the first version of the plugin, the stereo version seemed a little narrower, and so BJ and Rick at Metric Halo and at Make Believe, they had this brilliant idea to put in the dual mono version of it. And as soon as we added that, all of a sudden it means that the left and the right are operating slightly independently of each other. And now all of a sudden you get this great stereo widening effect that we were getting in the console too. So that was awesome. Then they added some other stuff that is unique to the plugin land, which again brings back the qualities of a console. So like in the analog board, when you've got all these faders on the mix section, not every channel is identical. They're not all like perfectly equal to each other. So because of that, you'd have this variation from channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way up to 24. And each one would be slightly different from each other. And so that would give like more quality to variation. It'd give more widening effect and make things just sound thicker and better. That was like, the analog effect. So if you come on in here, by doing this, there's a tolerance, which you can increase, you can increase the tolerance percentage, which I think 0 means it's perfect. And if you did like 10%, it'd be the equivalent of like, oh, these are all 10% resistors in here, for example. So each channel might be slightly different from each other with the wiring and the build inside with the components. So that gives you that variation where you can actually get more variation across the mix, which is really cool. And then frequencies here, you can do that where it's just doing the frequencies. You can have it just do the EQ gains. These are all like tolerance variations. You can have it just do the threshold or the attack and release times on the compressor. So these are great ways to just look for a little bit of uniqueness and variety in each setting if you want to dive deeper in when you're basically building your mix, building your sound with the plugin in your session. And then down here you just have a nice one, you just hit rando. And it'll just like randomize a bunch of them, and you can see if you like any of them and kind of get a quick solution and move to the next channel. And then again, you can get random variations against the low cut and the high cut too, and get all that dialed in. But wait, hold on. But wait, that's not all. Come on back, there's one more. All right, so if you click this guy, we'll close that out, and then come on over here to the M. Of course, there's more secret shit up here. Now if you go to the M level, you get the UI mode. That's the user interface. If you don't like the original scratches and dust from the board, click the clean mode and boom, you've got like a nice super clean version of it. So that's up to you, that's up to your taste, whichever one you like. You can have the version you want. Then you can also do things like have it show up in default into the classic mode or the modern mode. And then you've got these other things like, you can change your scribble strip to a dark version down here if you want from a light version. And you can have the low cut enabled or defeated. I guess you can just turn them on or off. And then let's see, what else have we got? What other fun things do we have? Then of course we got factory presets, and we've got tons of presets by all these great producers. It was pretty amazing to have all these folks jump in and create presets for their favorite stuff. I actually put mine in here too. I wasn't sure exactly what to do, because of course I feel like you're going to do stuff the way you want when you're dialing it in for your own taste. But what I did is I recreated a rough mix that I had done through the console myself of one of my songs, and then I rebuilt it, and I basically put the plugin on these different subgroups for like kick, snare, bass, stereo drums, stereo guitars, stereo keys. I did my vocals, I think, as stereo too, and then I just set my levels so that it was the same mix that I did in Pro Tools, hitting the plugins at the same kind of gain level that I was hitting the console, so that it was coming out the stereo mix, and I was able to get a really close match to that. In fact, I'll leave a link below. You can click on it. I've already made another video called, it's like the analog versus the plug-in, like which one sounds better. I don't remember if that's the exact title, but I'll put a link in it for you so you can check it out. It's me rebuilding a mix from the analog console into the plugins, and those are my presets from it. So hopefully those are useful, but there's lots of other ones in there. And if you have any questions and you want to check out the MBSI, please do. Please go check it out over at Make Believe Studios, or you can go to Metric Halo. And I hope you guys will really love this. It sounds amazing. I really love it on electric guitars. It's kind of got that thing that I always like, especially for classic rock, is the sound of Joe Walsh, It's just so many great guitar tones done that way. But check out my video too, see what you think on the sound of whether it matches up, and then just hit me up with questions in the comments and let me know what you want to know about this plugin, what you want to know about the console, what you want to know about me, what you want to know about the story of this board being in my studio. And if you have other questions, I'll get them from Bill Szymczyk and Rick and Metric Halo and Make Believe Studios, and we'll get it answered for you. Thanks for watching. I really hope you guys enjoy it. Cheers.